Hello and welcome to episode 81 of the Duke Basketball Report podcast. It is Thursday, September 7th, 2017. Football season has begun. Duke is 1-0. Basketball season is just around the corner, and the ACC released all the teams' schedules today. So we're going to dive into that and a couple other topics today. But before we get going, I just want to introduce the crew here. Just as usual, I'm Sam Klein. I am your host coming from Denver, Colorado. I am joined, as always, by Jason Evans in Atlanta, Georgia.
Hey, I'm very excited to be doing this. We got a basketball schedule.
We have a basketball
that is like
schedule.
it's one of the best days of the year.
Yeah,
Not as good
right
as when
around
we
the
play
corner.
games, but close to as good as when we play games because we get to
course.
think about the games. Yay!
And his body is in Washington, D.C., but his mind is in Detroit. And I imagine that he is sad that Justin Verlander is no longer a Detroit Tiger. Donald Wine, how you doing, buddy?
Well, I was doing really fine until you mentioned that. I was trying to hope that you didn't bring that up. But
Did you want to say a word or two for your boy? I mean, I love Justin Verlander.
He's still my dude. Justin Verlander is always going to be my dude. He's one of my favorite Detroit athletes of all time. And honestly, I'm now pulling for the Astros to win it all because that is my dude and he deserves a ring. But I was going to mention that, there's a few days that you look forward to: Christmas, the start of the NCAA tournament, and the release of the ACC hoop schedule. So today is one of those great days, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, let's not wait any longer then. Let's dive into the basketball schedule.
Hang on a second.
What?
Wait.
What?
We're talking about things Donald's upset about, and we didn't talk about the incredibly pathetic performance of Team USA in World Cup qualifying just last week.
I didn't
want to bring it up all stuff. That was like weeks ago.
I didn't want to go too deep on him.
That was weeks ago, man.
That was last week. It was last week.
Look,
Donald,
it was bad. It was really bad.
Look here,
Donald,
I was trying to start off on a positive note, and you guys are just taking this all the way down to the bottom.
You have too much sports emotion in your life.
That's why I was going to start with some happy thoughts. Hoop schedule.
Right.
Let's go.
So great. Yeah. Good. Thank you. Let's go to the hoop schedule. So the ACC put out the basketball schedule today. Duke has had their non-conference schedule out for a few weeks, and we talked about that briefly and how generally underwhelming it was, especially the home schedule. But the ACC schedule is out. We knew the opponents before. Now we know where all the games are. So I'll start with Jason. Give me a couple thoughts on the basketball schedule and take it kind of wherever you want, because I think there's a few interesting things going on. So why don't you just give us your thoughts on the ACC basketball schedule specifically for Duke?
Well, so if we're talking about the ACC schedule, I'll tell you the first thing that jumped out at me, and you're going to find this sort of funny. We played BC. BC is the first game of our ACC schedule, and I went, God, it feels like we always play BC early in the schedule. Early in the ACC schedule. So this year, they're the first ACC team we play, and we play them on December 9th. It has been a long time since we played an ACC game that early in the schedule. I know the ACC sort of had to adjust some things this year, and as a result, teams are playing games earlier than they used to. It used to be that Duke wouldn't play their first ACC game until December 30th, I think, was like the earliest in the past 10 years or so. But we've got BC on December 9th. But I looked. In the past 4 years, BC has been our first ACC conference game. It was only in last year in 2016-17 where they were the third game, but they were our first game in 14-15. They were our first game in 15-16, and they're our first game this year. And of course, the nice thing about that is you're going to start off with a win because BC has been terrible lately. I mean, BC hasn't been relevant in the conference in quite some time. So I think it's kind of nice. Duke gets to start off with a pretty easy game. The other thing that I noticed about the schedule is this is, to me, about as favorable a schedule, as good a schedule as you can imagine for the Duke Blue Devils, for a Duke team. There are probably 5 teams. There are 5 teams that everyone says are really good in the ACC this year. 5 teams that most people say are in the top 15 teams in the country. And that's Duke, UNC, Louisville, Miami, and Notre Dame. Those are the 5 cream of the crop in the ACC. We only play, of course, we play UNC twice. So we play them home and home. That's a given. We don't play any of the other 3 in a home and home. None of them. and we play Miami on the road, we play Louisville at home, and Notre Dame at home. So of the really tough teams, that's as good as it gets. And arguably Miami is the worst of those 5. We get UNC at home, we get Louisville at home, we get Miami on the road. By the way, there's no other ACC team that's going to be in the preseason top 25 in all likelihood. I mean, Virginia Tech, Florida State, Virginia are going to be good. Clemson and Georgia Tech be okay. That's sort of the top half of the conference. But the good teams, we just don't play them very much, and we don't play them on the road, again, other than Miami. In fact, I would say the only teams that are going to be in the top half of the conference, likely to be in the top half of the conference that we're going to play on the road are Miami, UNC, and I guess, maybe or Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech's the other one. But that's a really good schedule. And I don't want to be predicting records or anything like that yet. But if we don't go 13-3 or better against this schedule, I mean, I just don't. There's no way we lose more than 3 games against this schedule. I mean, I guess sure there could be some crazy injury, something could happen that we just cannot foresee happening. That could be just insane. I mean, this Duke team is not very deep, but just on paper, so Duke's going to be favored probably in every single ACC game they play. Maybe we won't be favored at UNC, maybe, but we'll probably be favored in every single ACC game we play. And I can't find. No way I can find more than maybe 3 losses. And by the way, if you look at the other top teams in the conference, UNC has a much tougher schedule than us. They play Notre Dame twice. They play Louisville on the road. Louisville has both Miami and Notre Dame on the road, as well as playing Duke on the road. I mean, the other top teams in the conference, they have it tougher than Duke. There's no excuse. There's no reason. Duke should be an overwhelming, once we see these schedules, now that we've seen these schedules, Duke should be an overwhelming pick to win the ACC this year. Donald, what you got? Did I get everything?
You got a lot of it. I echo your sentiment. When I looked at the schedule, I was definitely looking at a lot of things. And one of the things I saw was that it is a pretty favorable schedule. There's not a lot of, I look at a lot of things. First, I look at when the games are played. We have a lot of games on Saturdays. We have 11 of them on Saturdays. So, our guys are going to be used to playing on the weekend. We have a lot of breaks that are, 3, 4, 5 days, which is good. There's not a lot of back-to-backs, and there's not a lot of Saturday, Monday doubleheaders. We talk about when the Big East kind of reincarnated, we took their Saturday, Monday kind of slots, and it used to be where we would have a lot of those, especially doubleheaders on the road, Saturday, Monday on the road. The 3 Saturday, Monday doubleheaders we have the first game at home, and one of those double dips is both games at home. So I think that's pretty good.
So really quick, we have a Saturday, Monday with Wake Forest at home, and then at Miami.
Right.
And I sort of, that at Miami game is arguably, one of our 2 or 3 toughest games all year in all likelihood. And to have it as a Saturday, Monday turnaround is tough. I'd much rather the Monday was at home as opposed to being on the road.
And that Monday game, that Monday you're describing is MLK Day. So it's not like I even equate that, as a holiday. It's still a weekend game feel in that sort of aspect. It's not, we used to have those games where we'd be like at UVA, at Notre Dame, or at UNC, at Clemson, or something like that. We don't have a lot of those games where we have to go on the road both times. And we don't have it where we start on the road. We start all 3 of these doubleheaders at home, which I think bodes well for us. And I think, like you said, that one game at Miami is probably the toughest, turnaround on our schedule. I think the toughest, probably stretch we'll have is when we go, Notre Dame, and then at St. John's and at UNC. And now I know, and then at Georgia Tech. I know St. John's is not expected to be very good this year, but they normally play us pretty tough in the Garden. And that's that one, I don't want to call the trap game of this, that one game that we always, used to have in the middle of the schedule, that non-conference game on the road, and we'll be in New York for that. So I think that's kind of our, if you're looking at that, like last year we played 5 ranked teams in a row at the end of January, beginning of February. So I think this is a much more favorable schedule. The one thing, the 2 other things that I'll note, and I'll pass it along to Sam. First, I always look at who we play twice before we even play UNC once. And this year we actually play 2 teams. We play Pitt twice, and we play Wake Forest twice. And I think that being at Pitt is also one of those games that we've, usually not played very well in Pittsburgh. We've won some of those games, but I think they play us pretty tough there. So I think to get that game and to get the Wake Forest games out of the way, I think it's very killer.
Pitt is terrible. They're going to be just horrible this year.
That's fine, but I'm not talking about record. I'm not talking about how terrible they're going to be. We all know that when they play us, that it's not going to be a terrible team that shows up. One of these games is going to be a team that's going to give us their best shot, however weak it may be. And usually that's Pitt. And I think getting that out of the way is a good thing. The last thing I'll note is, we normally have this break for finals in December where we have like one game in the span of about 13 days. But from December 6th to January 6th, we're only playing 4 games. And we basically have a game, then a 10-day break, a game, then a 10-day break, a game, and then like a 6-day break. So I think that is going to be a stretch where our team is going to be able to gel a little bit more. We may get some rest. Some of these players that, may not be in the rotation early, maybe they have the opportunity in practice to earn some more playing time. And I think that's going to be a test when we go to BC. I know they're bad, but that's going to be the first test. Well, I'm sorry. We also have Florida State right at the beginning, right before the new year. That's going to be a good test for our team to be like, how do we respond from such a long layoff? Will we be rusty? Obviously we will be, but that's going to be a game where we're going to have to stay focused. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see how this team gels in the month of December.
Well,
Sam, I'll kick it to you.
And in that month, I looked at that stretch. I bounded it a little differently.
Mm-hmm.
We play Indiana on the 29th of February or of November rather. And then we play Florida State on December 30th. And in between then we have 4 games, not against Power 5 schools. It's South Dakota, St. Francis, Boston College, and Evansville. So there's a lot of time off there for the squad to kind of get healthy.
Did you just say that Boston College is not a Power 5 school? Because I don't know whether that was intentional or not, but that's awesome.
I was hoping that neither of you would say anything, and that someone would mention it in the thread, and then
I agree with you,
and then I could just be Mr. Dry Humor. So yeah, but that's that. You guys, I think, pointed out a lot of the really interesting stuff. There was one thing that I noted, and I think I also saw it on Twitter, but I'm pretty sure I would have seen this anyway. The 2 UNC games. So Donald liked to talk about the sort of back-to-back situations, the one day off games. And I always look at the rest situation. I think that I agree with Donald that all those setups this year, I think there are 3 of them, and none of them are terrible. Like you said, there's none where we're away and then come home. And I think looking at the game times, at least as far as we know now, there's no like Saturday night, Monday night. It's all Saturday afternoons. The Syracuse game at the end of the season is still TBD, but probably going to be in that 2 or 4 o'clock window. So we get those home games. They're in the afternoons, and then we fly and have all day Sunday and all day Monday. So there's no like really horrible back-to-back situations, but the most interesting rest item is prior to the 2 UNC games. So first UNC game is Thursday, February 8th. The last game before that is the Saturday prior, so February 3rd at St. John's in the Garden, which is a travel date, but is pretty friendly for Duke. So, and then we get 4 days off before UNC. Sometimes it's it can be like a Monday, Thursday. It could be a Sunday, Wednesday. This one's a nice long layoff, and then another long layoff before the last game of the season. Home against North Carolina on Saturday, March 3rd. The last game before that one is Monday, February 26th at Virginia Tech. So another kind of short trip. And then they have a lot of time to rest up before UNC games. I didn't look up UNC's rest situation before that, but I like that Duke has all that time off, because winning those games, it means a lot, I think, in the context of the national picture, because obviously UNC is always good and Duke is always good, and it's probably the best barometer we get, but also just for rivalry purposes, we like beating them. So
and also after after the first UNC game that we're at Chapel Hill, it's a Thursday game, and then the next game is not until Sunday. I know in previous years the league has liked to give both teams a Saturday game, and I think that is good to give that extra day off after that emotional high of a game,
definitely,
to kind of calm down and kind of get back focused for the rest of the ACC season.
And like I said, I don't know if that's intentional by the league, but I'm certainly happy about it, and I imagine the coaches are too, because even if no one wants to admit it within the program, those UNC games are emotional, and it's a big thing on campus, and et cetera, et cetera. So as much time as they can have around it, I think is good, because the players can sort of adjust themselves to it. Is there anything else? Anybody? Oh yeah, go ahead, Jason.
So the third UNC game that you're talking about, that's at Duke. You'll notice that the scheduled start time for that is 8:15 p.m. My bet is that ESPN has already decided that is going to be their, sort of their big national game of the night. They'll do College Game Day from Durham that day. I've looked at the schedule. There are really no other games that would make sense for College Game Day. To put Duke at the center of the college basketball universe.
There's one that's listed. Well, first of all, I think the UNC game, the one that's always the last game of the year, whether it's in Durham or in Chapel Hill, is usually when they put it College Game Day. They don't put it on the first game that's in the middle of the week. They do it for that last game. But
especially because the one in the middle of the week they have to share with the ACC network. So
correct.
Like if you're in an ACC market, you can't watch it on ESPN.
Correct. I guess you can now. They had some quirky things.
Actually, that's right. They changed it.
They changed it. But the one game that is on the schedule is listed at 2 p.m. or 8 p.m. is the game on Saturday, January 6th at NC State, which leads me to believe that they may flex that to 8 p.m. if for some reason they want to do College Game Day at NC State. I don't think they will, but it looks like they have it on that schedule.
I doubt we're
just in case.
Game Day in Raleigh.
It
would surprise me. I think it also
the Saturday game against Syracuse is also a TBD.
But again, I don't know how good Syracuse is.
I don't anticipate them, but they obviously are accommodating for that just in case.
I'm also not sure that game day starts that early in January because they're still doing football at that point.
I was just going to say, true. I think January 6th, right. You're still in the bowl season at that point, because the bowls now extend until mid-March or something like that.
Yeah. Right. So what they'll probably do is flex it based on what bowl game may happen to be on that day, because it's not going to be a major bowl on that day. It's going to be, the Mobile Bowl or something like that.
Well, but they might not even be doing game day, because I think they might just be focusing.
They might just be focused on that. Correct.
Yeah. I imagine the championship is right after that.
Yeah. So guys, the other thing I wanted to mention, we focused almost exclusively here on the ACC schedule, and I know we talked a little bit about the non-conference schedule in the past, but just seeing it in the context of the full schedule, couple things that jumped out at me just very, very quickly. Don't sleep on the Furman game, and you're going to laugh at me for that, but last year, this is on Monday, November 20th. Last year, Furman was number 106 in the Ken Pomeroy rankings, which isn't terrible. I mean, there are plenty of ACC teams that were lower than that. And Furman returns a lot of their roster, and they're projected to win their conference this year. ESPN, Joe Lunardi puts together his absurdly early bracketology. About one of the only things it's useful for is to look at and say, hey, who do they think is going to win these tiny conferences? Furman's projected to win their conference. South Dakota, by the way, is also projected to win their conference. We play them in December. But that Furman game really may surprise some people a little bit. I won't be shocked if that game's a little bit closer than folks might expect. I want to go back to the ACC Big Ten. I'll say it. Why the hell are we playing Indiana? Indiana's terrible. They're not going to even be in the top half of the Big Ten. There's a golden opportunity here. I don't know why we're not playing Northwestern. How awesome would it be for us to play Northwestern? Northwestern's picked like second or third in the Big Ten this year. They're going to be really good. I'm so upset that they're giving us Indiana. I know it's in Bloomington, and I'll probably eat my words, and Indiana will rise up and really give us a tough game. But I bet that game's a stinker. Indiana's just not very good this year. Anyway, that's what I got on the non-conference.
Yeah, I assume we're not playing Northwestern because Chris Collins is there.
But that's what we should play them. How much fun would that be? Come on.
Well, I don't think
I
Duke's
agree with
playing
you.
Northwestern because I don't
I
think
think they're
Northwestern has a profile for it.
That's true.
I think there's a lot of reasons for that. Let's move on. I think we've hammered the schedule. We're excited about it. Next thing, I think this one's a slightly quicker topic, but still exciting. Duke got its second commitment from the high school class of 2018 last week in Cameron Reddish. He's the number 4 overall recruit, according to 247 Sports. So Duke now has a small forward to pair next to Trey Jones, who's the point guard coming in. Jason, I know that you have watched some of Cameron Reddish's highlights or seen some games. Why don't you tell us about this dynamic small forward?
Yeah, this is a wonderful recruit, and Duke has been, to say that Duke has been on a recruiting roll lately is sort of is almost a joke. They're to go in the span of a month, we got Trey Jones, we got Marvin Bagley, and we got Cam Reddish. And by the way, Marvin Bagley and Cam Reddish are both going to go. They're both going to be top 5 picks in the NBA draft when they come out. I mean, these are really, really special players. A lot of people have begun to compare Cameron Reddish to Brandon Ingram because he, like Ingram, he's very skilled but very long. We're talking about a guy who's 6'7" with a 7'1" wingspan. This is one of these guys where, he can tie his shoes while he's still standing straight up. And Reddish does a great job of using that length, using that wingspan to get off his shot. He's just absolutely lethal in the mid-range game. He's probably more he's probably stronger, a little bit stronger than Brandon Ingram. Maybe not quite as athletic, but incredibly skilled, really supremely skilled. Has a really nice shot all the way out to 3-point range. If you guard him with someone who is his size, he's so skilled he'll go around them. If you guard him with someone smaller, he's so big and so long he'll take them in the post and post them up. He uses his wingspan, he uses his length pretty nicely on defense. He's just someone who's very, very skilled. And I brought up the Brandon Ingram comparison, but there are a lot of people who have more of a longer term outlook, longer term view, who are talking about maybe Grant Hill. Now, I don't think Cam Reddish is as good as Grant Hill. He's not quite as strong as Grant Hill was, even coming out of high school. But I mean, even to even be beginning to use comparisons like Grant Hill and Brandon Ingram, you can tell that Cam Reddish is a really special player. And his first name is his. Go ahead.
Do you mean that Cam? You're putting a lot of expectations on Cam Reddish's hair? All right, you were about to make his hair. Comments about the stadium that he's going to be playing.
Yes, I don't know about his hair, but his name is Cameron. How could a guy named Cameron not come to Duke? Well, he did come to Duke. And the one other significant thing about this recruitment and this kid coming in, and by the way, he like I said, 6'7", 7'1" wingspan, so he can be a stretch 4 if you want, because he's got the length to play the 4. But in high school and on all-star games and in AAU games and the such, this kid plays a lot of point guard. He can literally play any one of the first 4 positions on the floor. You wouldn't put him at center. He's not strong enough. He's not big enough for center. But he can play the 1, 2, 3, or 4. I know Duke doesn't have positions, but this is a guy who can play. If we had positions, he could play any one of those positions. But I was going to say the other thing about him that's significant is John Calipari at Kentucky wanted Cam Reddish. I think he wanted Cam Reddish more than any other player in this class. Maybe there may be 1 or 2 other guys that he wants a little tiny bit more, but he really went hard after Cameron Reddish. Calipari coached the under 17 or under 8, I guess it's the under 18, under 19, one of those teens. He coached the under 19 team that Cameron Reddish was on this summer, and many people assumed the Team USA team. Many people assumed that Calipari was with the players on that team, that he would have a leg up in recruiting them. And there were many really, really top end, high profile recruits on that team. Cameron Reddish probably was the highest profile one of them. And Calipari still did not get this kid. Duke got him. And I don't know that there's anyone right now who looks at the world of recruiting For a while, you said Kentucky ruled recruiting, and then you said, well, Duke has pulled even with them. At this point, I think there's little question that Duke has pulled ahead of Kentucky. Duke is the elite, the premier, the number one recruiting school out there. If you are a stud, crazy good player and you want to go and you want to be one and done, Kentucky isn't the destination anymore. The destination is now Duke, and that's a big deal. And Cam Reddish is proof of that. And I can't wait to get this kid on campus. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, I was got to talk about John Calipari and his recruitment of him, and I think that recruitment's been going on for years. I mean, he's been trying to get him on when he was doing stuff with the under 19. I believe he was doing under 15, under 17 teams as well, and he's been trying to get this kid to Kentucky all the way back then. But I think the one thing that was kind of funny is you were mentioning that some people were basically thinking that he was going to go to Kentucky, or that it was that he was not a sure thing, but pretty much expected to go there. I watched his recruiting video, his commitment video. And when he starts off with, I'm going to be wearing blue and white next year, I'm sure a lot of Kentucky fans started celebrating until the very, very end when he unzips his jacket and it's a Duke shirt he's wearing, which I thought was really funny because when I, knowing that circumstances, when he starts off with, I'm going to be wearing blue and white next year, I was like, this man is about to troll so many fans, and probably everybody in Kentucky hates him. And you know what? That's okay, because he's a Duke player now. I think the one thing that I will mention that you hadn't, when I was watching his game, especially I watched a lot of they had a lot of practice videos from the under 19 team that you mentioned. And he really has a lot of athleticism. And his athleticism is very versatile. I don't know, when you're throwing around, names like Grant Hill, Brandon Ingram. Brandon Ingram is the closest thing that I would describe him to, but I don't think he's that type of player. He's a similar player. But his athleticism is just really interesting to watch because of it, he can finish in a lot of different ways. It also allows him to be very aggressive in transition, both on offense and defense. And that's where he gets a lot of his points and really is able to find people on the wings to finish. So I think that is a very interesting dynamic that I'm really excited to watch next year. So other than what you just said, that's what I'll add about Cam Reddish. But a great player, a smooth player, and I think once again we are running things when it comes to recruiting, and I love it.
But by the way, one last thing on Cameron Reddish, and I should have said this earlier. There is one knock on him. There's a reason this kid isn't the number one player in the class, and it's because of his motor. People, you talk about how smooth he is, and you're 100% right about that, Donald. There are some recruiting experts out there, some folks who make the rankings who look at how smooth Cameron Reddish is, and they think he's not trying really hard, that he's not working really hard, and he does have a little bit of a tendency in some games to sort of disappear for a while. And you're like, wait a second, there's a top 5 kid on the floor and he hasn't really done anything for a couple minutes. The knock on Cameron Reddish is his motor and his drive. But there are a lot of people who've said, and a lot of people who've written, he went to Duke specifically because Coach K is known, perhaps Coach K's best quality is his ability to motivate, his ability to get guys to play hard all the time. At Duke, there is no coasting that goes on. And a lot of people think that Cameron Reddish picked Duke because he wanted a coach that would force him to always be working and would make his motor better. If this kid with his skills and his size and length, if you also give him a strong motor, there is no ceiling. I mean, he can be one of the best. Absolutely.
I don't have anything to add. So, you guys seem to cover him. I like every time that we have to talk about recruiting that I can just have Jason here and Donald also, but Jason especially just to tell us everything we need to know, so I don't have to watch all the recruiting videos.
I will say that I am one of those people who do not really follow recruits until they're very close to commitment, because back in the day, I used to do that, and with some big name players, and like, oh, this dude's gonna be great, and really follow them from like when they were like 9th grade all the way until they commit, and then they wouldn't commit to Duke, and I would just be like completely gutted, like that I wasted 4 years watching a kid that's not going to be in a Duke uniform. So I kind of one of those guys that start, watching players and following them right around now, like the summer before their senior year, when I can say, okay, now I know who the players that, we should be going after, or I think we should be going after. But it's been really good to see, do it from that perspective, because I'm following guys and then they're basically all recruiting or all committing to us. So I end up feeling a lot better about it.
Right
so wait, so you're telling me you haven't been following RJ Barrett?
Oh yeah, I've been following him, but in Zion,
I don't know
really
who that
Zion. Is. Yeah, Zion Williamson been following since he was like 8 years old.
I have heard of Zion
Williamson
Williamson because he has a fantastic name.
Yes,
and his highlights are absurd.
Yes,
yeah,
his highlights are crazy.
Maybe I'll go watch some Zion Williamson. All right, let's move on. We have a few more topics. So the next item we wanted to touch on was a bit of news that came out this week that the NCAA is considering removing the restriction on basketball and football players who decide to transfer and allowing them to play immediately rather than having to sit out a year. It would be an option that's available to them once. So the first time they transfer, they can play immediately. Then subsequently, they would have to sit out the year. But when you think about Duke players, and especially Duke basketball, transfers have been both in and out of the program have been a big deal for Duke in recent years. If you go back a few years, specifically talking about guys coming in, both Seth Curry and Rodney Hood got a lot of attention as incoming transfers for how well they were playing in practice and how much they could have helped the team right away. And so, you think about how Duke can pull in talented guys like that and how they'd be able to play right away. Certainly, though, there's a bit of concern, I think, especially among the coaches, that enacting this change would make it open season for them for guys getting recruited up in the middle of the season, and it'll feel like the recruiting won't ever stop from when a guy's in ninth grade until he graduates or until his eligibility is ended for whatever reason. So we just wanted to touch on it quickly and get each of our thoughts on the potential for this change. Again, it hasn't gone through yet, but it's a thing they're mulling over. So Donald, what do you think about the proposed transfer rule change?
So I think, obviously there's pros and cons. You outlined a couple of them. On one side, a player being able to find the best situation for them and realize that is not the best situation and transfer to what they think is a better situation and play immediately, I think is okay. You'll see, I think you may find a lot more players trying to do that. Especially when you realize that, hey, coaches can leave or go to another school. And then you have those players have to sit out a year if they transfer. So I think the fairness level, having a one-time, just like you have a one-time where you can, declare for the draft and come back. They had that rule for a while. I think that is okay. Here are the questions that I have when I thought about this rule a lot more. Will coaches still be able to block transfers to certain schools? That happens now. When players sit out a year, is that going to increase when players can play immediately? I think it would. I think that's something to think about. Also, you mentioned it. Will it lead to more tampering from coaches who are saying, hey, you're not playing at Duke. Why don't you come on to my school and you'll play next year? You'll start next year. Could it also, and obviously I know I'm digging a little bit into the weeds of this, could teams who are trying to get a bunch of players, like Kentucky, when they're trying to recruit 7-8 players, could they say, hey, commit to Duke, play a year. Next year, I'll have a scholarship for you and you can use your one-time transfer and then come to Kentucky then. Will that happen? And those are some questions that obviously I think the NCAA is probably weighing. But I think fans need to weigh that as well, because I think all of that may affect how you feel about this rule as a whole. I think in general, it's a positive move to level the playing field and make it a little bit fairer for some of these players to kind of, go in a situation and play immediately. The rule as it stands right now is not something that is built to really protect the student athlete. They say it's so they can get adjusted to classes and stuff. They're already doing that. You know, a lot of these players are fully adjusted to college life, and transferring is not going to be that big of a transition for them. But I think on the competitive side of things, I think that is where you get all these questions. And it'll be interesting to see how those are addressed when they discuss mulling this transfer change.
Yeah, Jason, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I was gonna let you jump in because I feel like Donald and I have done all the talking this episode. But
well, I'm kind of two minds. I sort of ultimately think it's a good thing because the players should be free to do whatever they want, and that the concerns over the tampering are probably extreme at first, and then I bet they tone down because the coaches only have so much bandwidth to be, recruiting players while the season's going on, and recruiting underclass, and recruiting high school guys. I think there's only so much attention they can pay to everything, and so it might honestly be like information overload for the coaching staffs, which would allow them probably to focus a little more on the guys they really want. And I think that it also is going to incentivize the programs to do better by the players because they are going to be more easily convinced to leave. And I think that I'm in favor. I know that we've talked in the past, kind of in general, about sort of players' rights and the potential for them to make money on their likenesses and all that kind of stuff. I think that this is a step in the right direction. I think that ultimately these players get produce a ton of publicity for the schools and for the programs, and they aren't necessarily compensated as much as they could be, particularly given what kind of money the coaches make and stuff. And so this is just another good thing I think that they're giving that they would be giving to the players, is to have that flexibility, and so ultimately it's a good thing. Now, in the short term, yeah, I can see how this is going to be like a total mess, and that coaches are going to have a hard time adjusting to it. And we're lucky that the team that we support and that we talk about here is a team that doesn't usually get hurt by transfers. I mean, there are guys who transfer out and then become successful. Elliot Williams.
Not many of them.
Not many. It happens, but more so that Duke brings in transfers and that they're really effective. Rodney Hood and Seth Curry being two relatively recent and outstanding examples of that. So I don't think it's going to really change things for Duke, but it certainly hurts a lot of other programs and programs that aren't that far away from being Duke either.
Well, also, I'm sorry, real quick. Was this rule just for basketball, or would it be for football as well? Because I see a lot of the negative questions or the concerns people have would be something that would be way more prevalent in college football than in basketball.
And it is being talked about in football, and that's going to be much more of like a Wild West situation because guys are going to get,
because you already have that. You already have that in a lot of instances. With coaches leaving and trying to at the same time recruit some of their players to come with them. So I think it'd be much more of an issue in college football, but not as much college basketball. Okay, Jason.
Well, and I was going to say the thing about football is one sport where there's so much physicality involved in it, and the maturity of players is so important that, as you guys know, a real will typically try to redshirt a lot of their freshmen. So guys don't get to play right away because you want them to get stronger and get more adjusted, and like football's a man's game even more than basketball is. And I wonder if a rule like this might discourage some of that, because coaches will be worried that a kid gets redshirted and he's like, I'm not getting to play. And if I went to this other school, I'd probably get to play right away. And it might, it might change the way football teams have to put together their rosters. But back to basketball really quick. I think it's worth noting that Coach K has spoken about this, and he doesn't like it. He thinks this rule is a bad idea. He said it feeds the one and done culture that already exists for many, many top high school players. And, it's worth noting, even though Duke has become one of the primary destinations of guys who are guys who are almost certain to be one and done, because Coach K wants to get the most talented players. He wants to work with the most talented players. That's why he coached Team USA for those years because he enjoys coaching the best players he can, even if he only gets them for 1 year. But Coach K doesn't like the one and done culture. Believe me, he would rather have these guys who come to Duke one and one done. He'd rather have them for 2, 3, 4 years. I'm sure of that. But he says that this kind of a transfer rule would feed the one and done culture because guys would either say, I've been here a year, I should go to the NBA, or they'll say, I've been here a year and I didn't make it to the NBA, so maybe I should go someplace else. I should go to a new program. And so he's concerned about it. He doesn't like it. One thing I sort of like about it is the GPA requirement. The NCAA has said that there would be a certain minimum GPA that they would say players would have to get in order to be eligible for this no penalty transfer. And I think anytime players are encouraged to work hard in their classes and get good grades, that's always a good thing. And many in the NCAA say the reason behind this is to try and get players to be focused on their schoolwork a little bit more than they currently are. But the bottom line, this goes back to something Sam touched on. If this goes through, make no mistake, it's good for Duke. It's really good for Duke, just from a competitive standpoint, because what you're going to see is the underdog players, the players you haven't necessarily heard of, the players who maybe go to a smaller program or they go to like a Georgia Tech, they go to a middle tier program from a Power 5 conference and they turn out to be much better than people expected. Those guys are going to go to the top programs the next year because they want to be on TV. They want to play with the best. They want to show that they're among the best. They see the success that schools like Duke and there are other schools like Duke, Kansas, Kentucky, UNC, we can tick them off, Florida, Arizona. They see how successful those schools are at putting guys. And what's going to happen is those blue blood programs are they're going to get to restock their roster with guys who are leaving middle tier and lower tier programs left and right. And I think that's an unfortunate thing. I mean, one of the fun things about college basketball is these programs that maybe they grab a couple guys who turn out to be better than expected, and the team, suddenly one of these middle tier teams gets to rise up a bit and become a top tier team for at least a little while.
Because a Steph Curry is at Davidson for 3 years.
Exactly. There's no chance. I'm telling you, there's no chance Steph Curry stays at Davidson if this rule existed during his time. Now, yeah. I'll tell you the other thing is he probably would have gone to Duke.
Yeah,
it's possible. I don't know that we know that, but
I mean, he's talked about his admiration for Duke and his admiration for Coach K. And while he was college, while he was still at Davidson, he talked about the fact that he actually said he wished he'd been recruited by Duke. So I think, I mean, I'm sure he felt plenty of loyalty to Davidson, and it's a wonderful school. And I don't know that he definitely would have transferred. I mean, that's, I'm not going to guess at that, but believe me, I think you would see players moving around even more than they are now. There's no question about it. And a lot of the movement would be guys who are really successful at smaller programs going to bigger programs and going to the big blue blood programs. Now, it also means that you're going to there's no question Duke loses Marcus Bolden if this rule was in place. He would have transferred, don't you think?
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, no question about it. And we probably, I would guess we probably would have also lost Javin DeLaurier. And go back over the years, there have been guys who didn't get a ton of playing time early in their career. Ryan Kelly, people forget Ryan Kelly was a McDonald's All-American. He was a top 15 recruit, and he did not play very much at all his freshman year at Duke. I bet Nolan Smith wouldn't have stayed either. No chance Nolan Smith would have stayed. Mm-hmm. Nolan Smith almost transferred anyway. Think about all the guys who, ended up being, I'll tell you another one. Jason Williams may not have stayed because Jason Williams, after he got to Duke, talked about how much he missed, and he sort of a little bit regretted not going to Seton Hall, which is where he originally thought he was really going to go. And he had a bunch of buddies there and stuff like that. And he was a little homesick his freshman year, even though he had a great, incredible freshman year. There are a lot of guys that are legends at Duke, that are great players who I think would have gone. They would have left. And I think I enjoy seeing players in the program as long as possible.
And well, like you said, I think it would ultimately work out better for Duke. But it is a shame that so many guys would move. I mean, there is I sort of mentioned it earlier that, there might come a time in the future where, I think for a couple of years there would be a little bit more chaos. And then I think it would actually wind down because there would be enough examples of guys making these decisions and having them not pan out. And you'd be able to more definitively explain to kids who are thinking about all these transfers, like, here are good examples of why you should stay, and why, even if it's not at Duke, even if it's at another program, why staying at the same place can be beneficial, and that you can kind of grow with your team and grow with your coach. But as we said, there's that this is still kind of an in-work thing. I think that whatever committee it is that would be deciding on this hasn't formally approved it yet or anything. But we'll certainly touch on this again if there's any future developments.
Really quick, I would like to say that even though I think the way this rule has been sort of presented, we've talked a little bit about the chaos, whether it would benefit Duke or hurt Duke. We talked about that. I would like to say that even though I hope this specific rule doesn't come through, I do hope that the NCAA is able to look at the transfer rules and figure something out with them. I think that they are currently unfair, and I think less restrictions on players is probably a fair thing when you consider that coaches can move. I think players should be able to, in some kind of ways, have more ability to move. I just don't know if this kind of freedom is quite the step that should be made at this time. Like anyone's listening to me.
Donald, did you have anything to add on that?
No, I think, you were mentioning the players that, the legends who could have transferred, out, immediately and played immediately somewhere else. And you could also think about the players, like how would the 2001 team be shaped a little bit better, with Dante Jones being able to play, or, Seth Curry being able to play in 2010. I think those sort of questions, you have them on both sides. And so I think that's what
Donald, did you just ask how the national championship winning teams could be?
No. I meant the layout of the team. Like, no, we obviously would have won. We won with them. But I think, it's one of those things where, like, when you talk about the great teams in history and you talk about the players that are on that team, people always remember the players that played, but a lot of people still, especially back in 2001, I remember at that national championship rally, the first thing Coach K said was, we would not have won this national championship if it were not for Dante Jones, who did not play a second. So I think that, if he was able to play, we still would have won, obviously. But I think those sort of questions are things that people are going to say, hey, maybe these guys would have played earlier, or they may, we might have gotten someone transferred in, and if they could play immediately. It's going to work on both sides. And I think that's what the NCAA is going to have to really consider when they weigh changing this rule.
So we have one more big topic we wanted to talk about, and then we have an announcement at the end of the show. Duke football. We're gonna transition to football. So for those who are only here for basketball, this is your warning. The Duke Blue Devils kicked off the season last week at home against NC Central, a game that has become something of a tradition for them. And in the spirit of that tradition, the Blue Devils beat the crap out of the Eagles. It was 30-0 when I started looking at other games and other things last weekend, and ended up, I think, 60-7. So this week, Duke faces a slightly stiffer opponent. That would be the Wildcats of Northwestern, a team that Duke has also made a tradition of playing, a tradition that I think I like personally, because Northwestern is, another school kind of like Duke, and that they play in a big conference, and honestly that they're one of the models for what this Duke program can be, each year as they're becoming more competitive in their major conference. So this is now the third season in a row that Duke has played Northwestern. The Wildcats have won the last two games, 2 years ago in Durham, and then last year up in Evanston. And before I kind of get to a couple of nuts and bolts previews, Donald, did you have anything you wanted to say about the Central game or about the Northwestern game coming up this weekend?
Yeah, I watched the Central game until the ESPN app completely crashed for half of America, including the East Coast. And I think it was like 42 to 7 or something like that at that point. But I think the one takeaway I have is that we have a lot of athletes on this team, and I think that's a really good sign. Also, when you have these teams, there's not a lot that you can take away as far as like how they performed, like relative to the team that they played. But I do like looking at the points, and we've always scored a lot of points against NC Central, but 60 points is the most that any Duke team has scored since 1949. I think that's a good thing, where we have a lot of options in a lot of guys who can put the ball in the end zone or put the ball through the uprights.
Presumably Central gets better every year because they've only been in Division I for a few years. Right. So you got to figure that they're able to recruit slightly better guys every season that they're removed from being Division II.
Right, absolutely. And again, this is their game that they circle in their schedule because they want to, come out and show something against a Power 5 conference team. So I think that, when you see we can put a lot of points on the board, we did it quickly. We did it in very different ways. And, we even had a pick 6, so our defense was clicking. That is the sort of things you want to see. Now, we have to obviously put it together. We didn't have a perfect game against NC Central, so we're going to have to put a lot more things together when we face Northwestern. And I think the key to that game is going to be the defense, not giving up big plays and not giving up momentum. Having the momentum is going to be key. And I think if this team plays, as well as they did last week, we have a great chance of winning the football game, especially when we talk about our big athletes, Sean Wilson, if he can run the ball very well, if Daniel Jones can make good decisions with the football, I think we're going to have a great day on Saturday.
Yeah, and to get a little deeper into Northwestern, if you remember from the game last year, Northwestern features a quarterback named Clayton Thorson, who was pretty efficient against us last year. He threw for 320 yards. And he had a nice game against us. And then their other big time player is a running back named Justin Jackson, a name that we like to root against, I guess. So those are kind of the two key studs for Northwestern. They have a few really good wide receivers as well. Really, the key last year in the game was some failures on special teams. We let them run I think they ran a kickback. It might have been last year. It might have been the year before. But we had some issues in the punting game last year. And so hopefully a lot of those issues are cleaned up. I think that the other thing that's important to look, if you want to look at last year's game and then look at this year's game, Daniel Jones had a nice game last year against Northwestern. It wasn't out of this world, and it wasn't late season Daniel Jones. So he has improved a lot since the last time he faced this team, even though it was only like 11 games ago. So look for him, I think, to have a big day. And like you said, Donald, it's not like you can take a ton from a game against an overmatched opponent like Central. But the Duke offense looked really nice on Saturday against that overmatched team. Jones was kind of doing what he wanted to do, and hopefully he can keep that up against a much bigger and more talented Wildcat team. So I'm excited for this game. I really think Duke can win this, and then also given the really poor performance that Baylor put on last week against Liberty, I want to be optimistic and think that the Blue Devils are going to be 3-0 here at the beginning of the season before ACC play starts. So that's kind of my general thoughts on football. Jason, did you have anything to add from last week or this week?
I got one thing to add. Folks, when you're watching this game, there's a name to listen out for. There's a name to pay attention to who you haven't necessarily heard before. In fact, Donald, who do you think I'm about to talk about?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
Why don't you enlighten
Britton
us?
Brown. Britton Brown.
Yeah, very good.
How after watching the NC Central game, how could you not want to talk about Britton Brown? This kid is he's a freshman running back. He ran for 120 yards last week against NC Central. He's a red shirt, and we've been hearing reports if you follow Duke football a little bit, I have some friends who are really into it, and they've been saying to me for more than a year, they're like, this kid's redshirting, but he's destroying in practice. He's apparently in preseason practices this year and spring practices, Britton Brown against the first team Duke defense, he was wrecking them. He was absolutely massacring them. And then he ran for 120 yards on only 10 carries against NC Central, which is a pretty good average. This is a kid who ESPN, when Duke recruited him, ESPN said he was the 18th best running back prospect in the country, number 18, which is pretty darn good. He was offered scholarships by Clemson, Louisville, Ole Miss, Stanford, and a bunch of other schools. Those are top tier programs. That I just named 4 programs that are in the top 10 almost every year, and they all wanted this guy. And he came to Duke. We had to wait and have him redshirt last year, but I'm really excited to see this kid play. He's our backup running back behind Sean Wilson, and I think people are just gonna, their jaws are gonna drop. I think this kid has the potential to be one of the real greats ever in a Duke uniform, and I'm really excited to see him play against Northwestern.
All right, there's your player from Jason Evans. I like it. So let's wrap up here. We have one more kind of announcement to make about the show. We're about to enter our 4th season covering Duke basketball and Duke football as we're able. So among the 3 of us, me, Jason, and Donald, we've discussed a little bit over the summer and recently about how we might want to start being able to sell some of the space on this show. So a lot of podcasts that you might listen to have ads or have sponsorships of some kind. So we haven't worked out all the details yet, but we think from talking to members of the community, we think it's okay that we're gonna start selling ad space here. So as I said, the details aren't all worked out. We know that that it's gonna look like you're gonna be able. You as a individual or a business are going to be able to buy ad space on the podcast. We're going to come up with sort of a pricing structure for it. And we mentioned this, I know, this week on the DBR forum, had a lively conversation, I would say, about it, back and forth with a few different posters who had some concerns about it. So we're hoping that we got them all kind of sorted out. And so I would say, unless Jason, if you want to talk more in detail about it, I would say that for the time being, if you think you're interested in advertising with Duke Basketball Report and you want more information, you can email us, right, Jason? I can tell them they can email us.
Yes, at dbrpodcast@gmail.com. dbrpodcast@gmail.com.
dbrpodcast@gmail.com. We'll also mention this on our post on the front page on DukeBasketballReport.com. We'll mention it in our forum thread that we always post for the show. We'll give all those details again. Again, it's dbrpodcast@gmail.com. If you email that address, at least one of the 3 of us will respond to you. And we're going to hopefully be getting that going really soon. We know we have a couple good episodes coming up in the coming weeks. We have the UNC football game here soon, and before you know it, it's going to be basketball season again. So that's all going to get going. We'll give more details kind of as we finalize them and as we need to send them out. But that's what you need to know for now, I think.
And I want to stress, first of all, it's not going to materially change the content of the podcast.
No,
it's still going to be the 3 of us having a good time. I mean, we're talking about maybe, something short, 10 or 15 seconds at the very beginning, maybe something in the middle. It'll almost certainly be something that we read out loud, not something where we drop a pre-produced ad in there. And it's not only going to be advertisements. If there are folks out there who appreciate and enjoy what we're doing and enjoy the effort that we're putting into it, and they say, hey, I want to give you guys a few bucks to say thank you, we're going to thank them by mentioning them, and if they want us to say something silly, we'll say something silly. So this is not something that's going to really have any material change to the content of the podcast. And the other thing worth mentioning is none of the 3 of us are trying to get rich off of this, and we know we're not going to get rich off of it. I mean, we're talking about we'd be
whatever
thrilled.
It is.
Yeah, we'd be beyond thrilled if I've said this on the boards. So if Sam can buy a couple beers, if Donald can buy a hat and some other swag, if I can take my wife to dinner once a month, then we will have hit a huge home run with this. So that's the standard here. So we're not looking, if you want to give us a lot of money, great, but we're not looking for a lot of money. We're just looking for a little something, because we spend a lot of time and effort. There's equipment involved in this kind of stuff. And, after a few years, we should maybe get a little something out of it. Not much. Believe me, not much at all. But thanks to all of you. I mean, thanks for listening.
Yeah,
The only reason we're only able
Right.
to do it because people listen.
Right, and we wouldn't be talking about this, I don't think, if we hadn't seen our subscriber numbers climb, and they have like kind of steadily over the 3 years that we've been doing the show. So sort of before we embark on our commercial phase, thank you again to everybody who listens, whether you've only recently tuned in or listened to every show. All the feedback we get plenty of good feedback on the boards, and from individuals. I know I've mentioned that I've met a handful of listeners kind of just around Duke events. I know the other guys have as well. We appreciate all of it and we're really glad that people listen. I think that we'd probably still like doing it if we didn't have as many listeners as we do. But it's great that people are here and tuning in, and that we get to keep this project going because we certainly have a good time doing it.
Amen.
Yeah, I think we always have.
Donald.
I was about to say, I think we all still are kind of shocked when someone comes up to us and says, "Hey, I really enjoy your podcast." I mean, it's been 3 years, and I'm still shocked when someone comes up to me and says that they listen to us speak. So thank you guys. That's very simply, thank you.
Yep. So with that, does anybody have parting shots on top of that this week? I didn't have one.
I would go ahead, Jason.
I was just going to say really quickly, I haven't seen it. I posted this on the boards, but I really strongly encourage people to have a look on Duke Blue Planet. DukeBluePlanet.com has an essay / photo essay about Antonio Vrankovic and his summer that he spent back home in Croatia. He's from Croatia, playing with the Croatian national team. And it really, it's wonderful insight into Croatian basketball culture. It's insight into Vrank and his family. His father was a huge star in Croatia, and also played in the NBA. And Stojko Vrankovic is his name. And his father's now very, very involved with the national team, which I think is one of the reasons Antonio got a chance to play with them this summer. But really a beautiful look inside the personality of a guy who's been at Duke, coming up now on his third season. I don't know how huge an impact he will have on the court this season, because Duke has a lot of very, very, very talented big men. But at some point, I'm confident that at some point before his career is done, we're going to need to call on Antonio Vrankovic. And I think the lessons he learned this summer playing with the Croatian national team, which is no small feat, I think will help him a lot. And I think it's really fun and really cool to get to know a little bit more about these remarkable young men. And many of them, in addition to the basketball, show us when they write these essays that they really are remarkable. Outside of the basketball arena, Antonio Vrankovic is a thoughtful guy, and it's just a nice piece on him. And I encourage folks, again, go to Duke Blue Planet and check out that article.
Great one. Definitely. Donald.
Yeah, mine is actually a little more serious of a parting shot, but I just want to send a thought up to everybody who is or will be affected by Hurricane Irma, who is now, as we are recording, barreling down towards the state of Florida. Obviously, you guys know I went to school in Miami and have a lot of friends down in that way. Hurricane Harvey came through Houston and the Gulf coast of Texas last week. I have family and friends down there. If you guys are in these areas, obviously our thoughts are with you, but especially for those people who live along the Eastern Seaboard, and honestly, living in DC, we have to think about this as well. If you're in an area that is, in the eye or in the direct zone of Hurricane Irma, please have a plan. Please make sure that you guys are preparing for the storm, and hopefully next time we have this podcast, we're talking about how Irma completely miss the United States. But if not, everyone be safe out there. All of our listeners, all of our readers on the forums, if you guys are affected, obviously, we're with you. Make sure that you guys are ready, and Godspeed.
Very well stated, sir.
Yep. Thank you very much. And only to pile on, because it seems like natural disaster is everywhere these days. We in Denver have gotten a little bit of the smoke from the fires out west, but also thinking about our friends and everybody who's out in Washington and Oregon and Montana and all the places that have been affected by these terrible fires. Hope that all that can get cleaned up real soon. And yep, Donald, I just wanted to echo everything Donald said about all the folks in Houston and in Miami and all the surrounding areas. All of our best to you and to everybody else. Whatever you can do to help out. There's going to be a lot of folks. There are a lot of folks in need now, and it seems like there's going to be a lot more of them soon as this hurricane reaches Florida here in the next couple days. So unfortunately, ending kind of on a sad note, but that's the way life is. So for Jason and for Donald, I am Sam. We are the hosts, as always, of your Duke Basketball Report podcast. This has been episode 81. Duke Band, take us home.